The world had never been more peaceful. Cities buzzed with the hum of technology, and the skies were free from the fear of war. For years, humanity had made remarkable progress. Hunger and disease were slowly becoming problems of the past. People were living longer, happier lives, and space exploration had taken off like never before. Humanity had finally reached a point where they could dream without limits. Colonies on the Moon, Mars, and distant space stations had become normal. The vast expanse of space, once a mysterious and dangerous frontier, was now a place of opportunity. Space missions were as routine as flying from one country to another. The stars, which once seemed so far away, were now within reach. For many, it seemed like Earth was on the edge of becoming the perfect utopia. However, despite all this progress, there was always a feeling of something missing, a sense that they hadn't yet unlocked the true potential of the universe. That was when the message came. It started as a faint signal, barely detectable by the largest space telescopes and satellite arrays on Earth. The first to notice it was Dr. Helen Caldwell, a scientist at the International Space Research Center. She was used to scanning the cosmos for signs of alien life. But this was different. This signal had a strange pattern, one that didn't match anything they had ever seen. It wasn't random noise or natural radiation. It was something deliberate. Dr. Caldwell was intrigued. She immediately sent the signal to her team, and soon, the world's top scientists were analyzing it. It was a message, a clear, intentional message. At first, the message was nothing but a series of repeating sequences of numbers and symbols. It seemed like the kind of thing an alien civilization might send to test, if anyone was out there. But then came the twist. A simple phrase appeared in the middle of the code. "We come in peace. Help us, and you shall be rewarded." It wasn't much, but it was enough to set the world on fire. The message was broadcasted globally. News stations, governments, and social media were flooded with excitement. The discovery of alien life was finally here. A peaceful civilization wanted to make contact, and they offered help in return for humanity's cooperation. The timing couldn't have been better. Earth was thriving, but there were still global challenges: climate change, poverty, and energy shortages. The promise of advanced alien technology was a gift many had dreamed about. The leaders of the world were quick to act. A united front of governments came together to form the Earth Aliens Peace Initiative. They believed that this was humanity's chance to take its place in the galactic community. They wanted to make sure they handled the situation with care, but at the same time, there was an undeniable urgency. The aliens had made their offer, and they couldn't afford to waste time. After weeks of debate and careful planning, the decision was made. They would send a team of scientists, diplomats, and military advisors to meet the aliens in person. The plan was set. Humanity was ready to take the first step into a future that could be brighter than anyone could imagine. However, as the world prepared for the historic meeting, strange things began to happen. Reports started flooding in from different parts of the world. Alien ships, large and silent, appeared in the skies above major cities. They hovered in place for hours, unmoving, almost as if waiting for something. At first, the appearance of these ships was met with awe. People stood in the streets, staring up at the enormous, shimmering vessels that seemed to defy the laws of physics. It was hard not to be amazed by their sleek, otherworldly designs. No one had ever seen anything like them. The aliens were not only real, but they had arrived. But as the days passed, unease started to grow. The ships didn't land. They didn't communicate. They didn't do anything except hover silently in the sky, watching. There were no signs of violence, no threats made. Yet the longer the ships stayed, the more people began to wonder, what did they really want? The governments reassured the public that there was nothing to fear. They were still in talks with the aliens, and everything was going according to plan. But Dr. Caldwell, the scientist who had first decoded the message, couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The aliens hadn't asked for anything specific, and they hadn't made any demands. Why were they just waiting? She turned her attention back to the signal that had first brought them here. Was it really a message of peace, or was it something more sinister? She had her doubts, but she had no proof. Then, as if to answer her suspicions, a new message appeared. This one wasn't part of the original sequence. It was a short, simple sentence. "The trap is set. Your fate is now in your hands." The message sent a chill through her. It was clear now. The aliens weren't here to help. They had planned something far more dangerous than anyone could imagine. But what could it be? Why would they offer help, only to set a trap? Dr. Caldwell's heart raced. The peaceful world humanity had worked so hard to build was now standing at the edge of a cliff. There was no turning back. The world had been deceived, and it was about to pay the price. The trap had been set. The storm was about to break. And humanity had no idea what was coming next. Humanity's initial excitement was palpable. News outlets ran constant coverage, showing the alien ships hovering over major cities across the globe. People gathered in large crowds, staring up at the sky with a mix of awe and wonder. Governments assured the public that this was a moment of historic significance, that the arrival of these extraterrestrials was the dawn of a new age. The peace that had been promised seemed too good to be true, but it felt right. Earth, which had fought so many battles with itself, was now united under the idea of a greater purpose. Scientists scrambled to decode more alien messages, diplomats wrote speeches, and military forces were put on standby, ready to welcome the visitors with open arms. Behind the scenes, however, cracks were beginning to form. Dr. Helen Caldwell, who had first decoded the alien message, couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The new message, "The trap is set. Your fate is now in your hands," kept playing in her mind. What did it mean? Why would the aliens, who had so carefully presented themselves as peaceful, now make such a cryptic statement? She shared her concerns with her colleagues, but most dismissed them, attributing it to misunderstanding or simple paranoia. After all, the aliens had shown no aggression. Yet the feeling of unease was growing, especially as the alien ships remained stationary in the sky, their presence almost suffocating. Meanwhile, global leaders continued with their optimistic plans. The first joint meeting with the aliens was scheduled. The world watched eagerly as the chosen representatives, including Dr. Caldwell, prepared to meet the visitors face to face. The meeting would take place on a massive floating platform, built specifically for this moment. The world's leaders and scientists had all come together for this historic occasion, their eyes shining with hope. But as Dr. Caldwell stood on the edge of the platform, looking at the alien ships, she couldn't help but feel a creeping dread. The ships had no visible markings or signs of communication. They were simply waiting. As the first representatives boarded the platform and headed toward the alien ships, the air was thick with anticipation. The aliens' message, which promised to help humanity, had captivated everyone. But Dr. Caldwell's mind kept returning to the warning. The trap is set. Was this truly an offer of peace, or was humanity walking straight into something far more dangerous? Just as the first step was taken towards these majestic ships, a sudden, ominous silence fell across the crowd. The alien ships remained motionless, and for the first time, the air felt thick with tension. It was as though the earth itself held its breath, waiting for what came next. The moment the first human representatives stepped closer to the alien ships, a strange, overwhelming stillness settled over the world. Cameras flashed, capturing the historic moment as the alien ships continued to hover silently above the crowd. But beneath the excitement, a cold fear began to seep into the hearts of those watching. Something was wrong, though no one could put it into words yet. The ships, despite their grandeur and technological might, were eerily silent. No communication, no movement, just an unblinking presence in the sky. The excitement that had been so palpable now seemed strangely hollow. Dr. Caldwell's mind raced. The cryptic message she had decoded earlier. The one warning of a trap had stuck with her like an anchor. She tried to push it out of her mind, focusing on the task ahead, but a small voice in her head kept whispering, "What if they've been lying to us all along?" As the human diplomats and scientists approached the ships, the air around them felt charged, heavy with an unseen force. People crowded around the viewing area, their eyes fixed on the ships, their hearts beating faster with each passing moment. The world's cameras were all focused on that single spot, capturing every second of what could be the most important event in history. But then, without warning, a soft hum filled the air. It wasn't loud, but it was there, vibrating through the ground and the air, making the hair on the back of their necks stand on end. Dr. Caldwell felt a chill run down her spine. She wasn't sure what it was, but the hum sounded unsettling. The alien ships remained still, but something was beginning to shift. Something unspoken, like the calm before a violent storm. The crowds were still cheering, still in awe, but Dr. Caldwell's instincts were screaming. The aliens had promised peace, but what if they were already controlling the situation, manipulating it without anyone realizing? The hum grew louder, almost imperceptible at first, but now noticeable to anyone standing nearby. It wasn't coming from the ships themselves, but from the ground beneath their feet. The platform on which they stood, the one built for this very meeting, began to vibrate ever so slightly. The air around the ships seemed to crackle with a strange energy, and an uncomfortable feeling spread through the crowd. Some people started to murmur, glancing around nervously. Something was off. Was this truly a peaceful encounter, or was it the start of something much darker? At that moment, the first message from the aliens appeared again on the massive screens installed around the platform. It was in the same strange alien language as before, but this time it was accompanied by a simple translation. "You are in our hands. We have shown you our power." The words echoed in the minds of those who heard them. Peaceful allies, they had seemed so kind, so welcoming, yet now the message sounded ominous. The crowd fell silent. The words rang in Dr. Caldwell's ears like a bell tolling for a coming disaster. She could feel the tension rising, as if the very atmosphere around them was tightening, drawing them all in closer to an unknown fate. The moment the message ended, the ground beneath them trembled. It wasn't an earthquake, but something close to it. The air seemed to shimmer with an electric charge. People looked around in confusion, but before anyone could react, the alien ships began to move, slowly descending toward the ground. No one had expected this. They had all thought the ships would remain above, hovering indefinitely. But now, the sheer size of these ships, their enormous shadows swallowing the sun, loomed over them like something out of a nightmare. The ships didn't land. They hovered just inches above the ground, their underbellies glowing faintly with an eerie light. The crowd stepped back in awe and fear, but no one knew what was coming next. The officials and scientists who had been so confident moments before were now uncertain, their faces betraying the fear that was creeping into their hearts. Dr. Caldwell stepped back, her instincts screaming louder now. She knew in her gut, this was no gift. This was a carefully planned move in a game far bigger than anyone had imagined. Before she could process the thought, another message flashed across the screens, this time in a bold, clear text. "The trap is set. Your choices will determine your fate." The crowd froze. No one spoke. No one dared to move. The gravity of the message weighed on everyone present. The peaceful world they had all known, the future they had dreamed of, was slipping away from their fingers. The aliens, once perceived as saviors, were now something else. Something far more dangerous. The calm before the storm had ended, and the true nature of the trap was only beginning to reveal itself. "You said." The alien ships, now fully hovering just above the ground, cast long, eerie shadows across the crowd. The air seemed to thicken, as if the very atmosphere was pressing in on everyone. Dr. Caldwell could feel the hairs on the back of her neck standing up. The message they had just received. The trap is set. Your choices will determine your fate, kept repeating in her mind. It felt like a warning, but also a threat. Humanity was now at a crossroads, and the decision they made in the coming moments could change the course of history. The excitement that had filled the air only moments before had been replaced by a chilling tension. The leaders and scientists who had come to greet the aliens were now standing on the edge of uncertainty. They were supposed to be the best of humanity, brave, smart, and united in purpose. Yet, as they looked at the ships, they couldn't help but feel small and helpless. What did the aliens want? Why had they come? And what did the message mean? The silence that followed the ominous words hung heavy. There was no clarity, no explanation from the alien ships. It was as if they were waiting for humanity to make the first move. As Dr. Caldwell scanned the surroundings, she saw people whispering to each other, their faces filled with unease. The calm, peaceful world that had once seemed so certain was now teetering on the edge of something far more dangerous. The ships, these magnificent machines, hadn't come to help. They had come to manipulate, to test, and now humanity was in their hands. A group of military personnel who had been stationed on the perimeter for protection began to move closer, their eyes scanning the hovering ships. Dr. Caldwell noticed their tense posture, the way their hands rested on the grips of their weapons. The public had been told that the aliens came in peace, but that peace now felt like a fragile illusion. With every passing second, the fear grew. Humanity had no idea what the aliens were capable of, but one thing was clear. They had control. The message, "Your choices will determine your fate," was the perfect setup for what was to come. The aliens were challenging humanity, daring them to make the wrong move. Suddenly, without warning, a beam of light shot from one of the alien ships. It was bright and powerful, slicing through the air like a laser, landing on the ground just a few feet from where the officials were standing. Everyone froze. The light pulsed for a moment, then faded. It was as if the alien ships had just made a statement. We control everything now. The world held its breath. Dr. Caldwell's heart raced as the beam of light faded. It hadn't harmed anyone, but the message was unmistakable. The aliens were making their presence known, showing their power. They could strike at any moment, with a force beyond anything humanity had ever seen. She couldn't understand why they hadn't taken any action yet. Why hadn't they attacked, or at least made their demands clear? Were they waiting for something? Waiting for humanity to make the wrong move? She turned to the group of leaders standing beside her. They were all tense, their faces drawn with the weight of what was happening. She had always been a scientist, not a politician, and never had she imagined she would be caught in a situation like this. They had assumed the aliens were benevolent, offering help to a world that was struggling. But the truth was becoming more apparent by the second. They were playing a game, and humanity was the pawn. One of the military officers spoke up, his voice shaky. "Should we engage? Should we strike first?" "No," another officer replied quickly, shaking his head. "We don't know what they're capable of. If we fire, we might provoke them. They could wipe us out before we even get the chance." The debate continued quietly, but Dr. Caldwell wasn't listening. Her mind raced as she tried to piece together what she knew. The message had been clear. The trap is set. But what did the aliens want from humanity? Why had they chosen now, when the Earth was at peace and poised for greatness? Were they trying to destroy humanity, or was this all part of some greater plan? As if in answer to her unspoken question, another message appeared on the massive screens surrounding the platform. It was brief, but chilling. "Your will to fight will determine your survival. We have already begun. Choose wisely." The words sent a wave of dread through Dr. Caldwell. Humanity was being tested. The aliens had set the trap, and now they were watching to see how humanity would react. Would they remain peaceful, submitting to the aliens' power, or would they rise up, face the unknown, and risk everything in a desperate attempt to fight back? In that moment, Dr. Caldwell knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The peaceful world that had once seemed invincible was crumbling. The choice ahead would shape the future of humanity, and the aliens knew it. A cold sweat formed on her brow as she looked around at the faces of the people around her. There was fear in their eyes, but there was something else too. Something stirring deep within. Humanity had always fought for survival, even when the odds seemed impossible. This could be their final test, and if they failed, it wouldn't just be the end of their civilization. It would be the end of everything. The alien ships hovered in the sky, their silent presence a reminder that the clock was ticking. Whatever came next, humanity had only one choice: fight or submit. And the aliens were watching, waiting to see which path humanity would choose. As the ominous message flickered off the screens, the air grew even thicker, as if every breath they took had to fight against some invisible force. Dr. Caldwell couldn't help but feel a cold shiver down her spine. The aliens were watching, their intentions as clear as day. Humanity was at a crossroads: fight for survival or bow to their superior technology. The world's leaders stood frozen in place, staring at the massive, hovering ships, unsure of how to proceed. They had been prepared for a historic meeting, for a peaceful exchange of knowledge. But this was no longer that. This was something far darker, something no one had expected. Should we fire? The question hung in the air like a heavy cloud, coming from one of the military officers who had been standing in the back. His voice wavered, betraying the fear that was starting to take root among them all. No, another officer snapped, though his own face was pale. We don't know what they're capable of. We've been told they're peaceful. We have no way of knowing if they're truly hostile or just playing games. The debate between caution and aggression went on, but Dr. Caldwell barely heard it. Her mind was elsewhere. What if this was the beginning of something much worse? The aliens had never directly harmed anyone, but every action they took felt like a test. The beam of light earlier, the chilling messages, the quiet power they radiated, it all pointed to one thing: they were in control. But were they trying to destroy humanity or simply test it? It was hard to say, and that uncertainty made the tension even more unbearable. As the military and political leaders exchanged nervous glances, something unexpected happened. A strange noise, a deep, resonating hum, began to fill the air again. This time, it was louder, more intense. It wasn't the same hum as before, but something deeper, more foreboding. The ground beneath their feet began to tremble again, and people instinctively took a step back. Dr. Caldwell's breath caught in her throat as she realized that the ships were not only hovering, but were now slowly descending toward the Earth. There was no explosion, no sudden burst of power, but the sheer size of the ships, more massive than any human aircraft, was enough to shake the very ground. The gravity of the situation hit her like a ton of bricks. This wasn't some peaceful arrival. The aliens weren't here to greet humanity. They were making a statement. We are above you. The leaders on the platform continued to stare up in disbelief, but there was no turning back now. The ships were descending, and with them, the world's hopes for peace. As one of the ships finally touched down, sending a gust of air through the crowd, a new message appeared on the screen. This one was different, less cryptic and more direct. You have 1 hour to decide. Choose to join us, and we will give you the future. Resist, and we will show you your doom. Dr. Caldwell felt her stomach twist. It was clear now. The aliens were giving humanity a choice, but it wasn't a true choice. It was a test, an ultimatum. 1 hour to decide the future of the entire human race. Would they surrender and accept the alien offer, or would they try to fight and risk total annihilation? The stakes had never been higher. The crowd was in chaos now. People were shouting, arguing, trying to make sense of the situation. Some believed they should comply with the aliens' demands, thinking it was the only way to ensure survival. Others feared that submitting would mean the end of humanity's independence and freedom. Dr. Caldwell knew that any decision made in fear could lead to disaster, but there was no time for calm thinking. The clock was ticking. The ships were here, and the aliens weren't waiting. A whisper started to spread among the crowd, something that wasn't spoken aloud but was felt deeply in the hearts of many. The fear of annihilation, the terror of the unknown, the pressure to choose between submission and resistance. It was too much to bear. But one thought seemed to echo louder than the rest. What if the aliens were lying? Dr. Caldwell's mind raced. There was no proof that these alien visitors were anything but manipulators. They had come with promises of technology and power, but their methods, sending a cryptic message, controlling the situation, intimidating humanity into a corner, felt wrong. It was almost as if they were waiting for humanity to break, to show its weaknesses, so they could tighten their grip even further. What if this was all part of a larger plan to subjugate humanity, to turn Earth into a colony of their own, with no hope of freedom? And what if humanity could turn the tables? The thought was wild, almost impossible, but it lingered in her mind. Humanity had survived through countless wars, natural disasters, and threats far greater than any single alien species. The aliens might have superior technology, but they didn't understand humanity's greatest strength, the will to fight, to survive, and to resist when all hope seemed lost. Dr. Caldwell turned to the officials, her mind racing for a solution. They had 1 hour to decide everything. There was no easy way out, no guarantees. The aliens had set the trap, but humanity still had a chance to choose its fate. As the ship's massive doors began to open, revealing a strange, glowing figure inside, Dr. Caldwell could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. Would humanity resist? Would they fight? Or would they fall into the trap the aliens had set? She glanced at the faces around her, searching for answers, but all she saw were eyes filled with fear. The hour was nearly up. There was no time left for second thoughts. The question now was simple, but impossible. Would humanity choose to fight back? The silence that followed the alien ship's descent was deafening. The glowing figure inside the ship, visible through the massive open doors, exuded an aura of calm power, its very presence sending a ripple of dread through the crowd. The alien figure seemed to hover just inside the threshold, waiting. Everything had led to this moment. The 1 hour the aliens had given humanity to decide its fate. In that time, the world had been paralyzed with fear, unable to agree on a course of action. Some advocated for submission, thinking that compliance might spare them, while others felt the growing urge to fight back, even though they had no idea how to face such an overwhelming force. Dr. Caldwell stood at the edge of the platform, her heart hammering in her chest. The words of the aliens echoed in her mind. Choose to join us, and we will give you the future. Resist, and we will show you your doom. Her thoughts raced, and yet, in that moment, she knew what she had to do. It wasn't about fighting or surrendering. It was about making humanity realize that they weren't just playing for survival. They were playing for their dignity. They couldn't allow themselves to be puppets in someone else's game. Do we really have a choice? Dr. Caldwell whispered to herself. But before she could gather her thoughts any further, the giant figure in the ship moved, its movements slow and deliberate. It spoke, its voice resonating through the speakers, amplified for the entire crowd to hear. You have made your choice. The message was chilling, but there was something else behind it, an undercurrent of something darker, something more sinister. It was as though the aliens already knew what humanity had decided. The figure's voice, calm and unhurried, sent a wave of uncertainty through the crowd. They hadn't made any official declaration, no vote, no agreement. How could they already know? The ground trembled once more, this time more violently. The alien ships had begun to shift, their engines humming to life with an eerie precision. They weren't just preparing to leave. They were preparing for something else. Dr. Caldwell could feel it. Something was happening. The ships didn't just appear. They were manipulating everything. The tension was unbearable as the massive ships began to lift from the ground. The crowd gasped in shock. Were the aliens leaving? Had they decided humanity's fate already? But then, a horrifying realization struck Dr. Caldwell. The ships were not leaving. They were pulling back to form a perfect, unbroken circle, surrounding the area, trapping everyone on the platform. The surrounding cities, the skies, the ground. Everything was slowly closing in. It was a trap. Humanity hadn't chosen yet, but the aliens had already begun the final phase of their plan. No matter what they decided, humanity would not be allowed to escape. The walls were closing in, and there was no way out. The world was holding its collective breath as the massive alien ships, now aligned in a perfect ring, released a pulse of energy. It rippled across the sky, and Dr. Caldwell felt the shockwave in her bones. The pulse was not destructive, at least not yet, but it was enough to send everyone into chaos. The platform began to shake violently as the ground beneath them cracked open. The pulse wasn't just disrupting the environment, it was disrupting the very fabric of their reality. Dr. Caldwell realized with horror that this was no ordinary trap. It was a test of survival, a trial that would break humanity down piece by piece. The aliens were not just trying to destroy them, they were trying to break them. They wanted humanity to question its worth, to break down its resolve, and then to submit. The political leaders and military officers scrambled to form some kind of defense, but it was already too late. The alien ships released another pulse, more powerful than the first, and suddenly, a barrier of light enveloped the entire platform. No one could move, no one could escape. The humans on the platform were frozen, trapped in place, unable to do anything but wait for what would come next. A cold, metallic voice filled the air, again from the alien ships. "We are not your enemies. You are your own enemies. We will give you a choice, but your answer will not matter. The trap is already set, and you will now see the price of your defiance." The voice echoed in Dr. Caldwell's mind. She struggled to breathe as the words hit her like a hammer. Defiance. Had humanity defied them? They hadn't even made a decision yet. This wasn't about humanity's defiance. It was about the aliens' desire for control. This wasn't just about peace or war. It was about domination. It was about seeing how far humanity would go, testing the very limits of their will. Dr. Caldwell turned to look at the leaders around her, their faces pale with fear. They were powerless in the face of these visitors, these invaders who seemed to control everything. And yet, in that moment, Dr. Caldwell saw something spark in the eyes of those around her. A determination, an unwillingness to let their future be decided by beings from another world. "Fight," she whispered under her breath. She didn't know how. She didn't know if they could win. But she knew one thing. They could never give in to this. No matter how strong the aliens were, no matter what they did, they had to resist. It was then that Dr. Caldwell's mind made a dangerous, thrilling decision. The clock was ticking. The trap was set, and humanity had already been drawn into it. But there was still one final choice left: the will to fight back. The world could either submit to the aliens' might, or they could face the storm together. She knew what she had to do. "Prepare to resist," she said, her voice steady but full of determination. "It's not over yet." And so, as the barrier of light continued to pulse around them, humanity's last stand began. Whether they would succeed or fail didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that they fought. They refused to be pawns in someone else's game. The aliens had set the trap, but humanity was going to make them regret ever setting it.